So tonight's topic, tournament top 10. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. Tournament fishing here across not only South Florida, Florida, the state, of course around the whole country and really the world is incredibly popular. But perhaps nowhere is it as popular as it is right here in South Florida. And there's a number of different types of tournaments. We've got sailfish tournaments that are really popular, all about release, catch and release. Okay, anybody ever fish a sailfish tournament? Okay, not very many people. We've got dolphin tournaments, of course, are very popular. Everybody's familiar with dolphin, also known as mahi-mahi, really popular. And then there are what is perhaps the most popular, what we call meat fish tournaments. A meat fish tournament is going out there and trying to catch the heaviest cumulative weight of a variety of different species, including dolphin, king mackerel, cobia, wahoo, okay, blackfin tuna, 5 different species there. All of these tournaments have really a lot of similarities to them. There's a lot of differences from one tournament to the next, but there's a lot of similarities. And what we're going to do here tonight is we're going to talk really about everything from beginning to end on what's involved with tournament fishing. Is it for you? Has anybody fished any tournaments? Okay, anybody want to fish more tournaments? Right? I mean, if you don't want to fish more tournaments, I don't know why you're here, because this is about tournament fishing, and it's about being a more successful angler in general. So we're going to help you here. So again, some of the similarities. First and foremost, you cannot win a tournament alone. This is a team sport, okay? And it is a sport. And you cannot win alone. You're not going to go out there and win a meat fish tournament or a sailfish tournament by yourself. It's not going to happen. So first and foremost, before you do anything else, you need a team, right? You need a team of people that you're going to be fishing with. And that team is going to vary as to how many members are on that team. It's all going to depend on your boat, how many, your tactics, how many people you want to be fishing with you. But it's not uncommon for these meat fish tournaments that are really popular here in South Florida, targeting the variety of species, to have upwards of 10 people on your boat, 10 teammates. Do you know 10 people that you would want to go fishing with? Okay, so right out of the gate, there's some challenges that are associated with putting together a qualified tournament fishing team. You've got to have the right people that are willing to make sacrifices, that are willing to spend a lot of time preparing for the tournament, because tournaments are not won and lost during the day of the tournament. There's so much more that's involved. Also, right out of the gate, you have to be able to communicate with all of those team members. You've got to get along with everybody. And if you have 10 guys or 5 guys or 15 guys or however many teammates, and if everybody has a big ego, you're going to have a hard time being competitive in any tournament. And if everybody really has their own ideas and everybody's shouting different ideas, you're just not going to go where you need to go. So you've got to be able to really have a structured team of anglers that are not only qualified, but open-minded to listening to really the captain. Because at the end of the day, the guy running the boat is in charge. That's how it works. He's in charge of where the boat is going. He's in charge of what's happening on the boat, and his word is final. Okay, so you have to understand that the people that are fishing with you, they have to understand that, and you as a captain have to be able to delegate to your team. And it's not so easy to find those people. It really isn't. And generally, tournament fishing teams are built. You'll have a team of people, and then each year they may add another angler, another 2 anglers, and the more that a team fishes together, the more productive that they're going to be out on the water, because you get to know everybody's behaviors, and before you know it, you're working like a well-oiled machine. You don't have to bark orders at anybody or question what anybody's doing, because you're, like I said, a well-oiled machine that has fished together on multiple occasions. So perhaps one of the biggest challenges to being a successful tournament fisherman is establishing that team. Next, you have to understand well in advance that when you put together that team, one of the most important things to consider before you ever hit the water, if you're going to be tournament fishing, is number one, who's responsible for what, because there's a lot of responsibilities associated with tournament fishing. So who's going to be doing what, okay? And who's paying for what? That doesn't seem like a real big issue until you win and there's a big fat paycheck that needs to be split up. And suddenly your 10 team members who in the beginning of the event said, oh, it's okay, whatever happens, happens. Suddenly they're all standing there with their hands out. So you have to, right in advance, before you ever get out on the water, you really need to designate who's responsible for what and who's getting what. I'll give you an example. When I tournament fished, I had a policy aboard my boat, my CV. I said, look, I'll pay the entry fee of the tournament. I'll pay for the Calcuttas, and of course the entry fee in the Calcuttas is the bulk, right? You know, very expensive to enter some of these events, which by the way, understand that tournament fishing is not cheap at all. It's not cheap at all. It costs a lot of money to be a competitive tournament team. But nevertheless, my policy was, look, I'll pay the entry fee, I'll pay the Calcuttas, I'll pay for all the fuel, okay? I'll pay for everything. But whatever we win right out of the gate, 50% goes to the boat to repay for all of those things, and the remaining 50% gets split up amongst all of the anglers. So if you have 10 anglers on the boat and you win X amount of dollars, at the end of the day, each of those anglers is only getting a very small fraction of that overall prize, okay? Now, other guys do it differently. Other guys say, hey, you know what? We'll all chip in an equal amount. If it costs $20,000 to fish this event, which don't think that $20,000 is a lot to fish a tournament, because some of them are $50,000 to $80,000, some of these really big time events, okay? But as far as the meat fish events that generally are right here locally, you'll easily dump 5 to 10 grand on one of these events if you really want to be competitive. So sometimes guys will get together and they'll say, hey, we'll all split it evenly. We'll all put up that money up front. Whatever the case is, whatever the scenario is, make sure that that is very clear right out of the gate, or you're going to lose some friends, okay? Make sure that's very clear right out of the gate. A clear line of communication is key to a successful tournament team well before you ever hit the water. I should also mention that some of these events require a lot of travel. Okay, not all of the tournaments that you're going to fish are going to be right here local. There are tournament trails that require guys to trailer their boats all over, not only Florida, but up and down the East Coast here, these king mackerel events. So your teammates have to have the ability to travel. They have to have a flexible schedule. So there's a lot more to it than just saying, hey, you guys just want to come fishing with me? Let's go fish a tournament tomorrow. Okay, there's a lot more to it than that. Because I can tell you the guys that are consistently successful are not doing anything randomly. Nothing is random. Look, at the end of the day, a blind squirrel is going to find a nut eventually. And somebody can go out here, anybody, and catch the biggest fish, one fish, and win a tournament. But to do it consistently, to be in the top 10, again, the title of this seminar is Top 10 Tournament Fishing. To be in the top 10 requires a tremendous amount of commitment, a tremendous amount of preparation, and a tremendous amount of effort. And as I mentioned earlier, a tremendous amount of money as well. Okay, so be prepared to dish out some cash. But if you're a winning team, hopefully you'll earn all of that back and then some. There are some tournament payouts that are on the local end, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 is not unheard of. On some of these sailfish tournaments, $200,000 is not unheard of to win in a single tournament. on some of the bigger white marlin and blue marlin tournaments all over the world, top prizes of over $1 million are not unheard of. So there's a lot of money to be made, but it's going to cost a lot of money to even have a shot at winning that kind of money. So first and foremost, you have to decide, what kind of tournament am I fishing? You know, do I want to fish a meat fish tournament? Like I said, that is a combination of 5 different species, or do I want to fish a sailfish tournament? And I can tell you that, you know, when I asked if anybody here has fished these sailfish tournaments, I think only one person raised their hand. Those guys that fish the sailfish tournaments, they're not here. They don't need to be here, okay, because they are far beyond this seminar when it comes to tournament sail fishing. That is a completely different animal altogether. Okay, it's at a completely different level. These guys are so keyed in and so focused on sailfish, on one fish. They're so dialed in on that one fish. And they literally eat, dream, and sleep sailfish. And right now, they're probably all just in a huddle talking about how they're going to catch their next sailfish. They don't need to be here. So really, if you're just going to get into tournament fishing, sail fishing is not a good entry. It's not a good, you know, it's too advanced, so to speak. On the other hand, some of these meat fish tournaments are a great place to get your feet wet, no pun intended, with tournament fishing. Especially because a lot of them have non-pro divisions, meaning if you've never won any money in a tournament, you can still have a shot and still be competitive against all of the other boats that have never won. And it's almost a tournament within a tournament. You're not really competing against the guys that are consistently on top, even though you're competing against them also. So as I mentioned, it's like a tournament in a tournament. And there are classes for families, classes for, and prizes for junior anglers, female anglers, pee-wee anglers, you know, anglers of all ages have an opportunity to win. So those are really great events for families and great events to just get involved with tournament fishing if you'd like to do that. But understand what you're against, what you're up against. You're up against teams who consistently win, and they consistently win because of the amount of time, effort, preparation, teamwork, and all of those things that we talked about earlier that require a lot of discipline, okay, a lot of it. So it's tough to really be competitive against those same guys. And you know, when I started tournament fishing here, I used to see the same names on the leaderboard all of the time. The same probably 20 boats. And it just seemed that they were juggled around. You know, sometimes this guy was in first, and next tournament he was in sixth. And that guy was in fourth, and the next tournament he's in first. But it always seemed to be the same boats. And they would come into the weigh-in, and they would weigh all of these fish. And for a while, I'm like, these guys are cheating. They're all cheating. They must all be working together cheating. Okay, bunch of cheaters. There's no way they're going out there and catching all of those fish while we're struggling. While, you know, if you have 100 boats, 20 of them are always the same and the other 80 are not catching anything. And I always used to think to myself, what are they doing? How are they being so productive? They have to be cheating. And when you hear me say cheating, there's really only one way to cheat in a meat fish tournament here in South Florida, and that is called live chumming, okay? Live chumming is the act of going offshore, taking live bait fish by the hundreds and just throwing them off the side of the boat. And if you throw all of these live baits all around the boat, they're gonna ball up into a giant school right underneath the boat. And that, of course, is going to attract everything and anything. And any fish that swims anywhere near your boat, you're going to likely catch that fish. They've outlawed that. That's absolutely illegal. You cannot live chum in any of these tournaments. Okay, so that's really the only way that someone could cheat. But also understand that winners of all of these events are required to take lie detector tests. Okay, different team members on their boats, because there's a lot at stake, you know, and they want to make sure that it is a level playing field. over time, and as my fishing experience continued to evolve here in South Florida, and I'm going back many, many years, I realized that, of course, they're not cheating at all. They're not. They're just that good. They really are that good of a fishing team. They're out fishing us 10 to 1, you know, and that really got me on a journey, on a quest to become a better tournament fisherman, a better angler. And really the day, you know, we've certainly placed in a number of events and even have won. And I remember the day when we won one of these major events here against 121 other boats. The top teams, 121. And a buddy of mine called me. We were back at the dock. It was probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock. The weigh-in was done. Everybody had weighed in their fish. And he called to congratulate me. And I said, well, why are you congratulating me? You know, I didn't even know. He said, because you guys won. And we didn't realize it until the very end. And I'll tell you what I ended up doing that night? I got drunk. Sorry. We all did. Okay? In a big way. All right. We celebrated because it was that big of an achievement for us. It really was. And sometimes, you know, it's not about, like I said, you know, going out and catching every fish in the ocean, but everything worked for us. So we talked a little bit about the team and how important that is. And again, understand that some of these events, like I said, they're great for families. It's low key. You can have a great time. And then other events, man, they're just so competitive that unless you're one of those top 20 teams, no one's even talking to you, you know, and you really feel out of place. So make sure that you get involved in an event that's right for you. And also understand that networking is very important. Those top 20 teams, you know what they're doing out there, the captains, all day long? Joe, what are you seeing? Tom, where are you at? Hey, Steve, you getting any bites? You know, all day long, they're communicating with each other. They're networking with each other because they realize that collectively, 20 captains and 20 teams fishing in 20 different areas, you know, combined, that's a lot of information that they could share with each other. And they don't mind sharing it because one event, it might help one guy. The next event, it may help the next guy. If you're gonna ask somebody for information, regardless if it's tournament day or any other day, I highly suggest that first you provide. You know, make sure that you provide some good information before you ask someone to tell you anything. Next, you know, after putting a team together, there's another really important element to consider, and that's the boat. There's been a big debate here in South Florida that continues to rage on what is the best tournament boat. Is it an open center console with outboard engines? Or is it a sport fish type yacht with the big inboard diesels? You know, what's the better boat? Well, let's talk about the pros and cons of each. Center console offers us speed. Speed. And speed is deadly when, you know, out on the water, deadly for the fish, because if my boat is the first one to the fishing grounds, I'm more likely to catch the largest fish in the area than any of the other guys. Especially when it comes, for example, to king mackerel, kingfish, which are a very, very popular species in the tournament series, not only in these meat fish tournaments, but also in kingfish circuits, where there are these tournament trails where there's only one fish. They're going after one fish, a king mackerel. So king mackerel are very much like a pride of lions. Who eats first in a pride of lions? I bet one of you kids can even tell me this. Who eats first in lions? Anybody? Right? The male. The big male lion, right? Daddy-o with the big, you know, hair. He eats before anybody else eats. It's the same thing with the big king mackerel. The big, giant, dominant fish eats first. So if you're the first boat out on the fishing grounds, you have a huge advantage versus, you know, a larger sport fish boat that offers comfort because it's much larger. It has an air-conditioned cabin, has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a full galley. You can lay on a leather sofa and watch a movie if you want on the way to and from the fishing grounds. So certainly there are advantages to the big sport fish boats. However, speed is something that you just can't duplicate or replace. It's that vital, is having a fast boat. Another thing about the center consoles is it's wide open, 360-degree fishability. I could fish all around the boat. With a large sport fish boat, I'm typically in the back of the boat. So we're only fishing off the back of the boat. And generally, 6 or 8 lines is the most that you could fish off of a sport fish boat, a large sport fish yacht. On a center console, it's not uncommon for a guy up in the bow to fly a kite and to fish 3 baits off that kite. A guy is in the stern flying another kite with 3 baits. And then there's a guy right in the middle flying a 3rd kite with 3 baits. So we have 9 live baits on the downwind side of the boat. On the opposite side of the boat, we fish another 4 to 6 lines. So it's not uncommon to fish 12 to 15 baits at a time when you are tournament fishing with 3 kites in the air. A lot of moving parts and a lot of baits. Why is that so important? Because a lot of the fish that we target tend to swim in either schools or packs, right? So the more baits that I have in the water, the more likely I am not only to catch one fish, but multiple fish. If a school of fish comes by, I'm more likely to hook 2 or 3, a double or a triple header, because I have more baits in the water. It's that simple. It's a simple, game of numbers. So again, a lot of advantages to the open center consoles. Of course, they're also more affordable than a large multi-million-dollar sport fish boat. It seems that those larger sport fish yachts, like the Hatterases and the Vikings and the Custom Merritts and the Ryboviches and all of those big custom sport fish yachts, are certainly better suited for marlin tournaments, longer range type of fishing all over the world. Here it seems the center consoles are certainly the dominant fleet, or the dominant competitors in all of these tournaments. As far as brand, whatever, I fish a 39-foot CV. I believe it's the best, high performance center console out there. You'll see a lot of CVs on the water. You'll see yellowfins, contenders, and a whole variety of different boats. I say the best boat is the one that you own, right? Or the one your buddy owns. That's probably even a better boat than the one that you own. It's the one that he owns. Either way, like I said, that center console is a big advantage over the big sport fish boats. So in advance of every tournament, we've got our team in place. We know who's going to be fishing. We know who's going to be doing what, because there's a lot of different activities that are happening on the boat at the same time. There are guys that are kite fishing. There are guys that are fishing the flat lines. And if everybody doesn't know what their role is in that team, there's no way you're going to win. Okay? It has to be that seamless, well-oiled machine. And the only way to accomplish that is, number 1, a clear line of communication, as we mentioned earlier, and number 2, practice. Practice. We used to fish together a lot, not only during the tournaments, but even when there wasn't a tournament, because that's what allowed us to get to a point to where we could be competitive. So we would spend a lot of time pre-fishing. That's what it's called, pre-fishing. Pre-fishing means going out in advance of a tournament and fishing as if it was the tournament. Now the difference is, you don't fish all day when you're pre-fishing, and you're primarily investigating. You're investigating different areas in advance of the tournament that will likely be a promising place for you to fish. So if the tournament is this weekend, which I believe there's some tournaments happening here this weekend, weather permitting, there's very likely, weather permitting, guys that are already pre-fishing today and tomorrow, checking out different areas, what the water quality is like, what they tend to catch there. Now, of course, if you get on a hot bite in an area, you don't want to catch all the fish that are there, because you want those fish to be there on tournament day, right? So at least you know that they're there, and then, of course, you move on from there. Lot of stuff happening in advance, and perhaps one of the most important is bait. Bait, live bait, plays such a vital role in tournament fishing here in South Florida that it's unbelievable. Okay, it's not as easy as just pulling up to a local tackle shop and saying I need a dozen shiners. Okay, here's my $6. Okay, no, it's nowhere near that. There are guys who are tournament fishing who own 2 boats. One boat that they fish the tournament, and one boat is just their bait boat. All they do with that second boat is go catch bait for days, weeks, and sometimes months in advance of these events. Okay, they catch their bait. Generally, goggle eyes and pilchards are the most popular baits. Sardines, threadfin herring, they're all real popular down here across the sailfish circuits, the sailfish tournaments, and the meatfish tournaments. And when it comes to the meatfish tournaments, perhaps the goggle eye is the most important bait that you can get your hands on. If you wanted to buy goggle eyes, during tournament weekends, they cost $80 to $100 a dozen. $80 to $100 a dozen. We generally go through 10 dozen on a day of tournament fishing. So do the math. That's $1,000 just in bait. And that's if you're going to buy the bait, and that's if you could even get it, because you're not the only guy trying to buy bait. He's trying to buy bait, she's trying to buy bait, he's trying to buy bait, he's trying to buy bait, she's trying to buy bait. Everybody's scrambling to get bait. So there's a huge demand for live bait. And often what happens is the guys that catch the bait, the commercial live bait fishermen, they just don't have enough to supply everybody. So you have that supply and demand issue, and the price goes from $80 a dozen to $100 a dozen because of the demand. Other issues that may occur with live bait, something that you may not even think is a big issue, rain. Rain. All of this rain that's coming. It is not uncommon to have baits in a pen, in a cage. Well, I can't pull it out now, but behind this big banner is a big cage, what we call a bait pen, that sits in the water with live bait. And we keep those baits alive in a canal or wherever we keep that cage, and we feed them, okay, regularly, because we want those baits to stay healthy. They're like our little pets. Okay, we want them to stay healthy all up until tournament time when we take them out and go out and fish them. However, if it rains right before the tournament, there's so much fresh water that's being flushed into the canal system. You wake up at 5 a.m. and you walk down to the dock to go check on your baits, and guess what? They're dead, all of them. And you are pretty angry at that point. Pretty angry, because your tournament day is gone, and you're not getting bait at 5 in the morning on tournament day. So what guys will do is they'll sink their pens. That's how they overcome the rain issue, because the rain, the fresh water is generally on the top, and they'll sink their pen to the bottom in deeper water, okay, to keep the baits alive until they need them. So there's a lot of moving parts with the bait. When handling their baits, you know, guys are so fanatical about live bait in tournaments because it does make that big of a difference that they will not touch the bait itself. If you touch a live bait, you're going to wipe the slime off the bait. And immediately you'll look at that bait and you will see no difference. You'll look at it and go, there's nothing wrong with that bait. But immediately that bait is going to start to get an infection, and it's prone to infection. Okay? It's very much like road rash. If you fell on the ground, and everybody's familiar with road rash, and before you know it, it scabs up and it gets infected, the same thing happens with these live baits. So they're so cautious not to wipe that slime off the bait by not only not touching them, but even when handling the bait, when taking the bait out of their bait well on their boat that they went out and caught, that they lost sleep, because most of these baits that we fish during tournaments, you catch them at night, which means you have to sacrifice sleep. You got to go out there and fish all night with a rod and reel, with what we call a sabiki rig, a multiple hook rig, to catch these live baits. They don't come easy. I promise you, they do not come easy. And when they catch them, they put them on their boat in a live well until they get back to the dock. Then they take them off their boat and they put them in the bait pen. And when doing so, again, they don't want to touch the bait. So we use very specialized nets. Okay, as you can see that this has mesh around the outside, but it has a plastic kind of cup, we'll call it. So we can scoop our baits out of the pen, and the bait is literally sitting in a puddle of water. He's sitting inside water. He's never touching the outside of the net. And we handle the baits one at a time, literally, one at a time. Because if you put two baits in here, they rub up against each other. And if they rub up against each other, they wipe the slime off of each other. And immediately that bait starts to slowly die. And when you get him out there and you're dangling that bait from a kite or on a flat line, if he's not 100%, I'll tell you what, you just don't have that same chance of fooling those fish that are going to help you win the tournament. Now, you know, look, there's no way to really say or to know how big of a difference it is spending so much time to handle that bait properly. But what I will tell you is to be in that top tournament, top 10, consistently, every single one of those guys, that's how they're handling their bait. So clearly, it makes a difference. I can't stress enough how important the bait issue is. And if you're going to be tournament fishing, you need to start thinking about that weeks in advance of your event, if not months in advance of your event. Where am I going to get my bait? Because I promise you that the top teams that you're competing against have it. They have a lot of bait. They'll travel. Also, by the way, don't think that they're catching their bait right here. There are guys that'll run all the way down to Miami or all the way up to Boynton and Palm Beach just to catch bait. And when you start thinking about today's fuel prices at $6.49 a gallon for fuel on the water, and you start thinking about a boat like mine, okay, that for me to run to Miami and back, there's 100 gallons. There's $600 just in fuel before I even catch a single bait, right? You've got to think about how now the value of how valuable that bait really becomes. But these guys that are committed to winning, that's what they're doing. Make no mistake. They're doing it right now as we speak. They're prepping to go catch bait. They're going out there. They're catching it. They're bringing it back. They're handling it very carefully. They're feeding their bait. They're making sure that those baits are alive, and they're constantly monitoring them. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but that's how important the bait is. So the team is vital. The boat that you're fishing is vital. And the bait is equally as vital. And then on top of that, you cannot take 100 goggle eyes and put them in a bait well on a 24-foot dusky, not that there's anything wrong with duskies, 24-foot dusky with a little rule pump, little bait well pump, you guys know what I'm talking about, that only works half the time. The other half, you can't even get the bait well to work, okay? And think you're going to put 100 goggle eyes in that bait pen and that they're going to stay alive, because they're not. That's why you see these boats that have these 100-gallon bait wells, and they spend literally thousands of dollars on sea chests. A sea chest is a box, for better or worse words, that's mounted down here in the hull, okay, in the boat itself, has multiple pumps in the box, and it's constantly being fed, okay, from a high-speed pickup. Because remember what I mentioned earlier, speed is so important, right? And guys are not fishing right here. A lot of these tournaments that are won, a lot of the tournaments that are held right here in this area are won by guys that are fishing in Jupiter, okay, 50 miles away. And they're going there at wide open throttle. That means the boat is skipping across the surface. So if your boat is not sitting in the water, you potentially are going to lose that water flow to your bait well. And you go real fast and you get up there and you open your bait well and your 100 goggle eyes are dead, okay? So they use these sea chests that stay pressurized so they never lose water flow. There's a high-speed pickup. The box fills with water. It's pumping water into your bait wells regardless of the scenario, and your baits stay happy, healthy, and that, of course, is going to help you catch more fish. So there's so much to it. Then there is the actual preparation for the event. What are some of the things that we need to think about? Well, obviously, we've talked about the team. We've talked about delegating and making sure everybody on the team understands what their role is. And remember that you can't have too many chefs in the kitchen, right? Like, you've got to have one chef and everybody listening to it. And it's the same scenario on the water. There's got to be one person making those decisions. That one person was me. And it's challenging because everybody's looking at you. Your entire team is looking at you. And you know the first question they ask the morning of the tournament? Where are we fishing? Where are we fishing? That's what everybody wants to know. Where are we fishing? You do your best as a captain to get as much information as you possibly can to make an educated decision. That's what I did. I networked, I pre-fished, I used every bit and every resource that I possibly had, including calling commercial fishermen, friends, anything, getting on the internet, anything I can do to get good information to help me decide where I'm gonna fish. And sometimes you make the right decision, and sometimes you don't. You zig when you should have zagged. You went right when you should have went left, okay? And also understand, one of the biggest decisions when you're deciding where to fish is that every minute that I am traveling, every minute that my boat is moving from point A to point B, guess what I'm not doing? Fishing. So then there's a whole other logic of, well, hey, if my lines and my baits are in the water for the maximum amount of time, I'm increasing my odds because my baits are in the water for the maximum amount of time. Rather than running 50 plus miles in one direction to fish for less time, knowing that I've got to be back in time, because remember that all of these tournaments, they have rules. It's not a free-for-all. They have either a bimini start. What a bimini start means is all of the boats fishing the tournament are all gathered in one area, and there's a countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, et cetera, at 0, boom, everybody goes, and they're gone. That's a bimini start. There are other tournaments where they have a lines in time, meaning you can leave whenever you want. Go, leave. We don't care what time you leave, but you cannot put your first bait, cannot touch the water until 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever that line in time is. Okay, and of course, every event is different. And then there's a check-in time where there's a deadline. Your boat has to visually be checked in, has to be seen by one of the tournament, employees or volunteers by a certain time. You have a number on a card, you're coming in an inlet, you hold up the number, they get on the radio and they say, number 38, we see you, you're checked in. So you're working with these tight deadlines on when you can leave, when you have to be back, okay, no matter what. And that comes into the equation as well. Should I run? Should I burn an hour or more in each direction and reduce my overall fishing time? Well, I'm gonna do that if I believe that I'm gonna catch that much more during that shorter period of time. So these are all decisions that you have to make. And by the way, I'm gonna tell you that that tournament that we won against 121 other boats, that one in particular that I brought up, we've won multiple ones, that one in particular, we fished right here, right out front. So don't think that you have to run 50 miles, because you don't. And as a matter of fact, numerous tournaments are won right out front, right at the front doorstep, so to speak. Okay, it's all about, where you're fishing is only one of the factors. Understand also that regardless of where you choose to fish, if you don't have the right conditions, you're wasting your time. You might pick off a fish here, a fish there, but you're never going to put together a quality catch that is really what you need to do in order to win that event. You're never going to do it if you don't have quality conditions. What are those quality conditions? Well, that's going to vary tremendously depending on the species that you're targeting. If I'm specifically looking for king mackerel, I'm okay fishing in water that has a little bit of a green hue to it. A little dirty, that's what we call it. It's a little green. I'm okay if I'm targeting the kingfish. If I'm dolphin fishing or blackfin tuna fishing, do I want to fish that green water? Heck no. I'm not going to catch any of those highly migratory pelagic species in that dirty green water. So you've got to take that into consideration as well on exactly what sort of conditions you're faced with. And conditions change. They don't only change day to day or tide to tide. They change by the hour. Even, let me even rephrase that. I think that's one of the reasons I love fishing so much. Everything is always changing. It's never the same. What's happening right now in 10 seconds is different, okay? The boat is drifted, whatever. It's constantly changing, constantly. And to me, I like that because it requires you to take all of that information in and to, absorb it all and to spit out a decision based on what's happening around you. And like I said, sometimes that's the right decision and sometimes it's the wrong decision. And also understand this, I don't care what team you have. You could have the 10 best fishermen in South Florida. You could have the 10 best fishermen in North America on your boat. You can make the best decision that you possibly can, and you can have the fastest boat, you could have the best bait, you could have the best chaos rods, okay, the best tackle, and just because you have all of those things, are you going to win that tournament? Nope. Okay? And that's what's so both frustrating and incredibly rewarding, because it's frustrating because you can spend so much time and effort preparing, so much money, so much, sacrifice to get ready for it and do everything right. And you get back to the scale and some yo-yo beat you. Okay, who guys fished for it's his first tournament, him and his neighbor, and he beat you. And you're just completely, you don't know what to say. Okay, you really don't. But that drives you to go back and to get better because again, anybody can win on any given day, but to be consistent requires, a lot more than just luck. But you definitely need a little luck on your side. And, a lot of people say, I'd rather be lucky than good. I don't know. I'd rather be good and lucky at the same time, right? But again, it's about consistency. So in advance of the event, we talked about the boat. Regardless of what boat you're fishing, there's obvious things that you need to consider. Fuel, safety gear, safety equipment, all of those different things. You have to take that into consideration. Backups of everything, everything. We do a lot of kite fishing in South Florida. This is a typical fishing kite. We use it for everything from sail fishing to king mackerel, blackfin tuna, dolphin, cobia, wahoo. We'll eat a kite bait. They're not cheap. This is a fishing kite, costs somewhere around $150 to $175 or something like that. I don't know what they're charging nowadays. You may have one. The top tournament team has 25, okay, on their boat, 25, because they get wet, you can't use it. Certain kites tend to fly, better in certain conditions. So they've got backups for backups for backups, which is really, really important. Their tackle, their arsenal is more extensive than probably everything in this store combined. Okay, these guys have so much tackle. They don't go out there, if they lose a rig or if rig gets busted, they don't sit there and have to re-rig. They grab another rod that's already rigged because they know time is of the essence. Every second that I'm out there doing anything other than actively fishing, in my mind, I'm wasting my time. I need to be as efficient as possible out on the water. My team needs to be as efficient as possible in order for us to be competitive, right? And that means getting way too much stuff ready in advance, stuff that you may never touch. But if you do need it, it's important that it's there, okay? Additionally, your gear itself, your equipment has to be in perfect working condition. Your rods need to be flawless, your chaos rods. Your reels need to be flawless and well maintained with a smooth drag system. Your line, this monofilament line, is so vital because it's the only thing connecting you and that fish. And if you're just out fun fishing on a Saturday, whatever, Sunday, and You know, you hook a fish and you lost them because your line broke. Whatever, you know, you don't care so much. When there's $200,000 on the line and you spent $14,000 before the morning of the tournament even got here, whatever it is, the line matters. The line matters. And especially when it's only a couple of pennies per yard. You know, it's probably the most affordable part of the entire equation. We respool all of our reels in advance of every tournament. Every single reel is lines peeled off, not to the bottom, because the bottom half rarely sees any use. But the top half, we pull it all off on all of the outfits and respool everything. We re-rig everything. All of our rod and reels are the same, meaning if I'm going to fish this conventional outfit, I've got 12 of these. They're identical. Why is that important? Imagine if you had 12 different reels that all operated a little bit different. I fished a white marlin tournament in the Dominican Republic. I'll never forget this. Went down, fished with a buddy of mine. And the way that they white marlin fish is you put out a couple of teasers, either dredges or whatever sort of teasers to bring the fish toward the boat, and they fish 4 rods with a naked ballyhoo, just a little ballyhoo on each rod. And you're literally holding that rod and reel, and it's in free spool, because the white marlin is a very smart fish. And the second he grabs that bait, if he feels any resistance whatsoever, any resistance, he goes and spits it out. Spits it out, just like that. So you literally have to be holding the rod, watching, and the captain up on the bridge will scream, and I promise you, he screams, okay, as to where that marlin is. And immediately he's telling you right short, whatever it is, and suddenly you're getting really nervous because there's a marlin, you're looking back, and he's on your bait, and you don't want to mess this up. And the second that fish grabs that bait, like I said, you need to release your thumb and let that fish just free spool that line out. Well, interestingly, when I got on this boat, right across their, right in their transom, they had a fighting chair. It was a big 60-something foot Viking. And they had their 4 rods lined up, and every single reel was different. I've never seen that, ever. I've never fished a tournament team where all of their reels were different. And I said to the guy, I don't understand. Can you not afford the same reel? I mean, you got a multi-million-dollar boat. He said, no. He goes, each angler on their team has a preference. One guy liked the Shimano Talica, the way it felt in his hands. The next guy liked the Daiwa whatever. The next guy liked the Penn or the Accurate or the Avid, whatever it was. So they consistently had the same rod, but each angler had his own reel. And they rotated throughout the day. But when an angler fished in this position and then went to this position, he reeled up and took his rod with him and then fished in this position. So the only person that touched that rod was that particular angler. For me, I thought it didn't make a lot of sense because if you have multiple people on your boat, it's much easier to have one reel that everybody knows how to use because you can grab any rod and it's consistent. Unless, like I said, in their particular case, that one angler held on to that rod. You may not be picking up what I'm trying to explain. I'm going to say it in a different way. This is a lever drag reel. Okay? I get a bite, I lock up the reel, I push that lever forward. There are similar reels that have a star drag. Okay? Not one of these, but there's, here. They have a star drag, okay, that operate completely different. Well, if I'm not fluid in both of these reels, if I don't have a clear understanding as to how each reel works, it's too easy for me to mess up, okay, to mess something up. Anybody ever lose a fish because they did something wrong on the water? Only 3 people raised their hand. Who's ever lost a fish because they did something wrong on the water? Okay, we call that angler failure, okay, angler failure. So we try and eliminate angler failure altogether by fishing consistent outfits across the board. So no matter where you are on the boat, if you're fishing a kite rod or even if you're fishing a flat line, the reel is the same. The line may be different, but the reel is the same. So it's just consistent. So again, these tournament teams have an arsenal of gear that's well maintained. They spend a lot of time in advance of the tournament getting all of their equipment rigged and ready. They have, rigging parties. That's what we used to call them. Hey, everybody meet up at my house at 6 after work. We're having a rigging party and getting all of our tackle spooled, rigged, talking about what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And then it comes time for the boat itself when you're fishing. If a guy is fishing a kite flies up in the air, and there are typically 3 baits that come off that kite. I like to fish, the way that we fish is one guy works one kite. So there's one kite, and he's working 3 baits. But when he hooks up on a fish, and he now is walking up to the bow of the boat to fight that fish or wherever he is, there are 2 rods that are unattended. Somebody has to attend those rods, right? So our policy was very simple. I was like the coordinator, I guess we'll call it, because I could clearly see what everybody was doing around the boat, and I would back everybody up. Who's gaffing fish? Okay, anybody ever lose a fish because they gaffed it wrong or attempted to gaff it and they broke the line because the line got wrapped around the gaff, or one of 50 different things that could happen? The angler is fighting the fish. This happened to me, by the way. I just want to make sure the guy's not here. Definitely not. We're out on a trip, wahoo fishing, recently. And he's in the corner, and he's reeling in a wahoo. Not a huge fish, 20, 25 pounds, okay? But still a wahoo, a nice fish. And he's in the corner, and the rod's in the rod holder. And I'm, talking to one of the other anglers, monitoring everything that's happening as he's fighting his fish. And I walk up to grab a gaff. He's getting close. I'm assuming, first mistake, assuming, okay? Assuming he's going to take the rod out of the rod holder, which is in the back corner, right here. It's right there in that back corner, a bent butt rod. And I'm assuming he's going to lift it up and slowly walk back so I can get in between him and the fish and gaff the fish. Well, he decided to leave the rod in the rod holder and to reel the fish through the air. So I reach up for a gaff. I turn around. He's still right here straddling the side of the boat, still cranking, and the fish is in the air, going like this. Anybody want to guess what happened to that wahoo? Okay. I don't need to tell you what happened. Certainly no one ate it for dinner that night. Okay, I promise you that. So something so silly, but it was my fault for not being a better communicator and for assuming that he knew what he was going to do. So I bring that up because out on the water with your team, when you're tournament fishing, don't assume anything. Okay, talk about it in advance. Don't assume. Because during the heat of battle, when it's exciting, you got a fish on, everybody's fired up, you're already spending the money. You haven't even seen the thing yet, and you're already figuring out, how am I going to split the winning prize, okay, or how am I going to cook the thing? In that exciting moment, it's easy to forget to instruct people what to do or to, stay calm. So make sure that you do that. There's plenty of time for excitement later on. So the simple things, like I said, somebody's got to be the designated gaffer who's going to gaff the fish or release the fish if it's a release tournament. Which, by the way, keep in mind, a lot of these release tournaments, everything has to be videotaped. There's one guy's job on the boat to do nothing but to hold that GoPro. All he does is follow people around all day long. Every time you hook a fish, he is filming that entire interaction, because they've got to prove when they caught that fish, when they released the fish, etc. That's his entire role, is to film everything. So there are different people on the boat who do different things. And it's very important also that, look, if I get a fish on a kite bait, and somebody else is going to slide in to take over for me, is it important that that person know how to kite fish? If not, he's not the right person, right, to come in. So we need to communicate that in advance. And again, that all goes back to the clear line of communication. We talked about the tackle, having a lot of it in perfect condition, everything rigged and ready, backups for everything, okay? Plenty of everything. We talked about the boat, we talked about the team, we talked about the bait. Now let's talk a little bit about strategy. This obviously, is also equally as vital, depending on what you're going to be doing. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about sail fishing because, again, you're not going to enter the tournament world in the high stakes, high dollar sailfish tournaments. You're likely going to enter the tournament scene in something like the Ladies Fish Off, which is an event that is happening this weekend, okay? One of the Blue Water Movement meat fish tournaments. There's the Pompano Beach Fishing Rodeo. Anybody ever hear of that? Okay. The only issue with the rodeo, I don't know if they still have the same policy, but it was a 2-day event where you fished for 2 days. That's a lot because you need a lot of bait for 2 days. You need a lot of bait for 1 day, let alone 2 days. Nevertheless, that's likely where you're going to get into the tournament scene, or maybe it's a dolphin tournament, okay, which there's some of those as well, something low key. Oh, you're flagged. You just spilled that everywhere. I'm only kidding, okay? So, strategy. Like I said, network in advance. And if you're not going to take it serious, if you're not going to take tournament fishing seriously, don't tournament fish. Don't do it, I'm telling you, because it can be incredibly frustrating. It can be incredibly rewarding, but it's also incredibly frustrating. And as the decision maker, I can tell you in my particular case, man, I used to lose sleep. I couldn't sleep the whole night in advance of a tournament. I'm like, where am I going to fish? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Where are we going to go? Should I go there? Should I go? No, I should go there. No. And you start second guessing yourself and second guessing your decisions. And you finally have to get to a point where you just got to believe in your own abilities and believe in your decisions and stick to it. But like I said, it's very frustrating. And when you go out to execute and something happens that you never even considered. For example, it's Saturday morning, the morning of the tournament, okay, the Bimini start, you go to fish, there's no wind, none at all, zero, there's not a puff of wind, and you're literally just sitting still, okay, there's no current, there's no wind, and boy, you're not catching anything, I'm telling you right now. You're only catching what might luckily swim under the boat. And now at this point, your whole strategy of, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to kite fish and you're going to put those, you're going to do that and you're going to do that. And you get there and suddenly you can't do any of that. You can't do any of it at that point because the conditions just don't allow it. So you have to be able to switch it up on the fly and to say, okay, well, we're going to go slow trolling. Or we're going to run to a different area altogether to find some current. Or whatever it is that you're going to do, but you better be prepared to do that. So like I said, you'll have these frustrating moments that you have to overcome. And perhaps there's no worse frustration than here it is, 1 o'clock, and you got nothing. Nothing in the box or nothing impressive. You certainly know you're not going to be competitive at the scales, okay? And the time is just ticking by. And the pressure is just building and building because you have a lot at stake and you want to perform well. You want to perform well not only for yourself, but for your team, right? And from everyone on the outside looking in, because I promise you, they're looking in. They're looking in. So if you're going to get involved, like I said, in the tournament fishing, take it seriously and do it the right way. If you're not going to do it the right way or take it seriously, don't do it. Don't do it at all, okay? Because it's cheaper and more fun to just take a bunch of buddies and go fishing and have a good time and not have to worry about all this other hoopla that's associated with tournament fishing, okay? But there's something special about it because it's competitive. Who has a competitive spirit? Are you competitive? If you're competitive, there's perhaps no better way, to show your competitiveness than tournament fishing. Something else that you may want to consider too, there's some local fishing clubs, like the Offshore Anglers of Pompano Beach, I think is one, and they hold tournaments internally. That's a great place to start because it's affordable. You don't have to spend an arm and a leg. You don't need $1,000 in bait. You don't need 30 rods rigged and ready. You're not competing against me, okay, and guys like me, so to speak. So in turn, it's do we? I know, they were like, you know what? Whatever. Right? Perfect. So again, you know, those local fishing clubs, I really recommend it. You know, it's a great place to network. It's a great place to meet other like-minded individuals. And, you know, if you want to tournament fish and you want to tournament fish and you want to tournament fish and you fish a local tournament, and then, you know, you get a few people that are really into it and you go, you know, maybe the 3 or 4 or 5 of us should get together and fish on one boat and go fish in one of these higher stake tournaments, you know, and try and become a team and really get competitive like that. So it's a great place to start. Also, there's a lot of tournament teams that think they can walk in the front door of a tackle shop like this one, and I am certain that this has happened, where they walk in the front door and they go, "Hi, I'm Joe. I have a tournament fishing team. Will you give me all my tackle? Can I have a whole bunch of rods and reels?" Guys, that ever happen here? Okay. Don't think that people are going to be, or companies are going to be giving you a bunch of free stuff because you have a tournament team. Don't think that's going to happen. It doesn't happen. It's not that easy. Are there companies that want to provide you support? Are there companies that are willing to help you? Absolutely, there are. But you better be competitive, because nobody wants to support a loser. I hate to say it that way, but that's the truth. Okay, because if you're winning for a reason. I'm winning because I'm fishing Chaos rods. I'm fishing Diamond monofilament. I'm fishing Shimano reels. I'm fishing a CV, Mercury engines, Furuno network. You know, all of these different components are all coming together. And those are the type of teams that these companies really want to stand behind. Okay, they don't want to stand behind someone who's just not taking it serious. Okay, they really don't. So think about all of that. Also, during competition day, the teams that win know that every single bite matters. Every single bite. I'm telling you, I cannot tell you how many tournaments I have fished where at the end of the tournament, I'm like, oh my God, if we would have had one more, we would have went from 8th place to 1st place. Or we would have went from 12th to 3rd. Or from 3rd to whatever it is. If we would have had one more, it's always one more. If I had one more fish that was a weigher, this all would have changed. Sailfish tournaments, like I said to you, these tournaments with hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line are all based on releases, right? And times. And usually, 1st place and 2nd place is separated by one fish. One fish. The top guy had 13, the second guy had 12. You know, and that one fish cost that 2nd place team could be $100,000. And for them, it's not only about the money. I got to be honest. The guy who's got a $7 million yacht, he don't give a shit about winning $100,000. He don't. He cares about being the guy up on the stage going, "That's right, we won. We won. It was us. We won. Look at me. We won." Okay? It's about ego, prestige, you know, whatever it is. On these local events, it is a little bit more about money, right? And it's a little bit different. You know, your mindset needs to be different. But understand, every single fish counts. That's why we double check every single connection. We triple check it. If a knot doesn't look right, you know why a knot doesn't look right? Because it isn't right. This isn't rocket science. It's fishing. Nope, that's not right. Cut it, retie it. If you have a little fray in your line and you say to yourself, "Oh, you know what? I'll redo the rig on the next fish." That next fish could be that tournament winning fish that you lose. You know, I don't know if there's anything worse. I don't know what's worse. Losing a quality fish, okay? You hooked up to a big fish and you lost them. Is it worse if you see the fish next to the boat before you lose them? You'd rather see them and then lose them? Or is it worse to lose a quality fish and go, ugh, what was that? I lost him. What was it? And never see it. You know, I don't know. I think, but whatever the case, the bottom line is losing that fish hurts. And if you lose a fish because of something that you did wrong, something that could have been prevented, there's nothing worse than that. That's why the winning teams win, because they don't let those angler failure and tackle failure issues enter the equation. Look, we can control everything except for two things. I can control the boat, I can control my tackle, my bait, where I'm fishing, how I'm fishing, all of that. I can't control the fish and I can't control Mother Nature, no matter what. Those two things. I need to learn how to deal with that regardless of the hand of cards that I'm dealt. I need to learn how to deal with that on any given day that I'm out on the water. But again, the top teams, because they know that every bite matters, they're not only fishing flawlessly, but they'll even go the extra mile. I've got a rod with a jig rigged and ready, okay? Everything is set. The guys are kite fishing. The baits are out there. The flat lines are out there. Everything is seamless. We're drifting. It's perfect. You know what I'm going to do at that point? I'm going to pick up a rod with a jig, and I'm going to drop it down, and I'm going to jig. And you may say to yourself, well, how in the world is a jig going to make a difference when you have 12 live goggle eyes? Well, first of all, I don't have a live goggle eye on the bottom. And sometimes big blackfin tunas will feed right off the bottom. Other times it's not a jig. For me, this is a live bait. I'm bringing it to life in my hands. It's not a piece of metal. To you, it might be a piece of metal. To me, that's a ballyhoo. And what eats ballyhoo? Everything. Everything that's going to help me win that tournament eats ballyhoo. So if I can drop another bait down and pick off one fish, because understand that here, most of these meat fish tournaments that we're talking about, there's a minimum requirement. Your fish must weigh 10 pounds in order for it to count in a tournament. Catching a 10, 12-pound blackfin tuna or king mackerel is incredibly common on a jig. So if I'm able to just catch that one extra fish, it could put us over the top. The guy who's chunking, okay, when we're out here meat fishing for the blackfin tunas, we chunk. Okay, we don't chum because that attracts sharks. We don't throw live bait because that's cheating, right? So we cut bait. We throw cut bait, we chunk. But the guy who's chunking, whose job it is to chunk, has a spinning rod in his hand and he's feeding out a bait. We talked about this in the last blackfin tuna seminar, which by the way, you can watch on our streaming channel, like I said earlier, to get caught up. But he's got a rod in his hand. He's maximizing everything he's doing. And that's what the entire mindset of the entire team is. It's how do we maximize every single second that we're out here. They take this seriously, sometimes way too serious. Okay, and that's also one reason where really, you know, truth be told, I had reached a point in my tournament fishing career where I said, I'm stepping back from this because this was supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be a team building activity, and it's starting to get a little bit too serious, you know, and that's, there are people who have professional teams that do nothing but, you know, prep and all year tournament fish. Let them be that serious. When I go out fishing, I want to have a good time. I want to have fun. I go out there to relax. I want you to do the same. I go out there to unwind. I go out there to create memories with friends and family and to just have, you know, an enjoyable life and to make the most out of it. And if tournament fishing starts to take away from that, then it isn't for you, okay? Other people thrive on it. Great, go out there and do it. You know, do your thing. Execution, preparation, you know, all of those things are absolutely vital, regardless of what tournament you're fishing. And then finally, let me just close by saying one more thing here again. I cannot stress enough how important it is to eliminate angler failure and tackle failure. You know, I said earlier where one fish can make a difference in that tournament. Forget the tournament. Forget the tournament altogether. Who likes to go fishing, right? If you go out there and catch a 50-pound wahoo, and that's the only fish that you catch, who had a great day? If I go out there and I go sail fishing. It's my first time sail fishing. I've never been sail fishing before. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I don't know. I just got a new boat. I'm fishing with my buddy, and I catch a sailfish, a beautiful sailfish. He's jumping all over the place. We're all jumping for joy, taking pictures. It's the only fish we caught all day. Who had a great time? Okay? Point I'm making is one fish. One. That's all it takes. You know, I'm not talking about a guppy. I'm not talking about Nemo. Okay? I'm talking about a fish. But one good quality fish can change the outcome of the entire day. And oftentimes, that one fish is lost because of a mistake that you made. You know, if you're not familiar with how to fish the equipment properly, learn. We've got this great thing out there. You guys ready? Google. Okay? I don't care what you want to know. Google has the answer. He'll show it to you 38 different ways, okay, no matter what it is. So there's no excuse for not making the most out of it. You know, otherwise, if you're not going to make the most out of it, enjoy a different sport. You know, learn the basics. Don't try and get too fancy. First, learn the fundamentals. Know how to tie an improved clinch knot before you tie a bimini twist, okay? Learn, you know, what tackle you should be using and how to scale everything down to get more bites. One of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of people doing out on the water, a lot of new anglers, is they fish equipment that's way too heavy. They're fishing line that's too heavy. They're fishing rods and reels that are too heavy. Can you hold that for me? Is that heavy? Could you fish with that all day long? Totally, right? I mean, it's light, it's sensitive. Okay, but you can catch anything that swims out here on this outfit. Okay, it's an incredible reel, a Shimano Talica. It's an incredible rod, a Chaos Gold Series built right here. All right, it's fresh line. As long as my drag is set properly and I've got 500 yards of line on here, there are a few fish that I cannot conquer with this one outfit. But yet I still see people go out there and they're fishing equipment like, you know, I don't know, did they watch Jaws last night? And they got the big giant reels, and I'm like, what are you doing? And they're fishing these big lures. You know, remember that here in South Florida, some of the most predominant forage, the bait that the fish are eating, are small, very small. Small shrimp, small silver sides, glass minnows, sardines, small little baits. Don't think that you need a giant piece of bait to catch a giant fish, because guess what? Elephants eat peanuts, right? Elephants eat peanuts. The largest fish that I've ever caught in my life was an 824-pound giant bluefin tuna. He ate a piece of bait that was half the size of a golf ball, just a chunk, a small chunk, barely big enough to bury that hook in that chunk. Elephants eat peanuts. It's more about presentation, more about proper execution. There's so much more to it than thinking you can just take a big fat rod and reel and put a big fat juicy bait on it and go out here and think you're gonna, you know, catch a big fat fish, because it's not gonna happen. And you're in an area here that sees more pressure than likely any other area. In Florida, there are more people right here. It's crazy. Go out here on a beautiful Saturday. How many boats are up and down the edge of the reef? Too many. Too many, because it seems like, hey, I just moved to Florida. Hey, let's get a boat. Let's get a boat. Okay? It seems like that's everybody's logic. They move to South Florida and suddenly everybody buys a boat. So there's so much pressure, and 98% of them have no clue. But combined, those 98% are taking away, you know, a lot of fish, and they're causing a lot of boat traffic out there. There's coastal degradation. There's pollution. There's all of these different things. Doesn't mean you still can't go out there and have a great time, because you can. There's still banner days to be had. There's still trophy fish to catch, you know, and a lot of variety. And make sure you have that variety, because if you're single-minded and you only do one thing, then what if that one thing doesn't pay off? You're stuck, right? You know, so make sure you've got a plan B and a plan C in place, no matter what. And if you're gonna tournament fish, like I said, do the very best that you can. Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody coming down. Gonna do a